So today I want to talk about worthiness and the ability to receive. Ernest Holmes says this: the universe is impersonal. It gives alike to all. It is no respecter of persons. It values each alike. Its nature is to impart, ours to receive. This story came through my email this week, and I was explaining this morning that sometimes my talks just flow easily and others I have to just kind of wrestle to the ground. And so when this story came through my email, I realized this is a story that I want to share with all of you. This author named Carrie Lake, she writes about a time when she went with a friend to a horse auction. She wasn't looking to buy a horse. Her friend was looking to buy a horse. And they went to the auction in hopes of rescuing one of the horses from being sold to a meat buyer, which sometimes happens to unwanted horses. There are always horses there at the auction who have plenty of life left. They just need someone to show up and recognize their value, see their heart, and offer them a space where they could just be a loved horse. And so this is what Carrie writes. So we watched horse after horse being auctioned to buyers who had far more cash than my friend did. And so toward the end of the auction, the wranglers herded 2 young bay Arab stud colts into the room. It was clear that they hadn't been handled correctly and they were not in good shape. So they were brought in at the last minute to avoid the scrutiny of the potential buyers. So they ran around the auction pen. They were scared and defensive, and nobody raised their hands to place a bid. So the horses were taken back out of the auction house. So the following month, my friend and I went back to the auction yard with high hopes. And again, just like the previous month, at the very end of the auction, the wranglers herded in 1 young horse who was too small to interest the meat buyers. And I immediately recognized him as the smaller of the 2 we saw at the end of last month's auction. He was frantic, traumatized, terrified, and he was clearly in pain. The auctioneer launched the bidding at $500. And I heard people chuckle under their breath as if to say, yeah, for that thing, $500? So the price came down and down and down as buyers watched this lonely horse search for some escape. $300, $200, $100. I felt a mixture of disgust and anger that these people were so incapable of seeing the beauty and the will to live in this horse. I saw it, I knew I could help him, but I wasn't there to buy a horse. Finally, the auctioneer slowed down and said, all right, folks, who'll take this guy home for $50? Me, apparently. I felt my arms shoot up in the air, declaring to the entire crowd that my heart is the softest. Bang! The gavel came down, and I now owned a 2-year-old horse who had no training and a terrible start in life. It's a good thing my friend brought her horse trailer. Like I said, I didn't go to the auction looking to buy a horse. But in this particular moment, nothing was more important than helping this horse on a new path in life. So I paid my $50 at the auction house plus tax, and I bought a $7 plastic halter. The clerks in the office looked at me a little funny and said, oh, you're the one that bought that colt. You better be careful. I wasn't worried. Out in the yard, I saw my new horse alone in a large paddock. I walked over to the gate and stood there for a while. I just stood there, watching him, letting him watch me and smell me and feel me. And one of the cowboys was walking by and he was swinging his rope, and he said to me, you know, that colt is dangerous. He's out to hurt somebody. You won't be able to catch him. It took 6 of us to get him in the trailer last month. You let me know and I'll rope him for you when you're ready. Okay, thank you, I replied, and he walked away, confident that I was going to fail. So I stayed quiet at the gate, and I started looking at what kind of condition this boy was really in. He had patches of bare skin where he had fallen, or his hair had actually been whipped off. He had scars where his mouth had been tied shut with a wire. His legs were covered with cuts and sores, and I was surprised when I noticed that he had one white sock. It was hard to see through the caked dirt and dried blood from a wound slightly higher on his leg. And all of these wounds were evidence to me that he had been at a rodeo where horses are whipped into a frenzy so they'll run blindly and the cowboys can rope them and trip them. His eyes were still strong and bright, though. He was aware and alive. His spirit was so strong, totally committed to resisting any attempt to force him into servitude. I was in love with him already. My sense is this colt refused to run at the rodeo. He had been through so much. He'd seen so much confusion and pain, and he still emanated the will to not only live, but to live free of domination and servitude. I didn't want to own this horse. I didn't want to train him. I just wanted to be his friend. So we stood quietly together on opposite sides of the fence for about 15 minutes. I watched him, and he kind of discreetly watched me. And keeping my own mind clear, I opened my heart to give him the best chance to assess for himself who I truly am, what I'm about, and whether I was here to fight him or to help him. I opened the gate, and I stepped into the paddock as if I belonged there. His body faced away from me, and I stayed at least 20 feet away from him, and his left ear followed me until I stopped moving my feet. And when I did, he turned his head and got a square look at me. With the plastic halter hanging from my shoulder, I said hello, but silently. I did not approach him. I did not reach out to him with my hand. I stood still, breathing, sharing with him my sense of relief that he had truly found escape from that life of torture. He let out a big breath, and he refocused on me, scanning me more deeply. As he did, I took a half step back, letting him know that I understand, that I intend no threat. Then I took a break and I walked away for 10 minutes or so and talked with my friend about bringing around her horse trailer. And all the auction guys planted themselves up on the fence to watch the show. "You're gonna need a rope," they assured me. "Okay, thanks," was all I said. I was quite happy for their attention, honestly, call it pride or my own sense of competition, but I wanted them to see what kindness, communication, and acceptance can accomplish. So I went back to the paddock and I walked directly in. I stepped within about 10 feet of him and showed him the halter. He turned his head again to watch me. His feet were stock still. And silently I communicated to him, "I'd like you to wear this halter and follow me through this barn to a large trailer where there's hay and soft bedding. I want to take you where you can eat grass and rest with no whips and no ropes." He felt my offer. He contemplated it for a moment, and he let out a deep sigh. His eyes softened, not in submission, and he lowered his head in a gesture of his acceptance. So I walked straight up to him. I gently fit the halter around his head, and he exhaled and licked his lips. And I turned myself toward the gate as if he and I had already done this walk hundreds of times together. With the slightest pressure on the halter, I asked him to come with me. And the gentle release when he responded communicated to him that trapping him was not my intent. So he followed me directly out the gate and up the breezeway of the auction lot holding pens, and the wranglers all watched in silence. This young horse, my new hero, chose to trust me and walk with me. When we made it out to the other end of the paddock area where the trailer was waiting, we had an audience. But this horse and I were focused on each other. I was focused on bringing him safely, gently into the trailer, and he was focused on not being beaten. We walked the wide chute area toward the trailer, and I kept walking again as if he and I had done this together 1,000 times. I held thoughts and pictures and sensations in my mind of a young, spirited horse traveling safely and comfortably to a place with a large grass pasture in the company of a young quarter horse mare. I saw the picture of him walking gently into the trailer, and all these pictures and senses I held with an open heart, and I offered to him in preparation of the next step in our journey, some peace. Beyond any hope or expectation I could have had, he followed me straight into the trailer with no hesitation. He flicked his ears to let me know he understands, he's ready, it's time to go. So without ceremony, I closed the trailer door, I climbed into the truck, and I headed home. And I forgot to wave at all the wranglers. I called this giant horse in a small body Dufresne. after the main character in one of the most satisfying stories I know, The Shawshank Redemption. So my Dufresne settled into his new pasture home immediately. His wounds healed faster than wounds are supposed to heal, and his hair grew back and he gained weight overnight. He was immeasurably happy to give his attention to learn about saddling, hoof care, and the other pleasant parts of how humans and horses share their lives. Like a kid walking into the candy store for the first time, he'd walk around the pasture with long grass hanging out of his mouth, his whole body engaged in a smile, born again into a completely different world. Take a deep breath. This is a universal story that illustrates my point today perfectly. Dufresne stepped bravely into worthiness when someone allowed him to have a new thought about himself and about his life. Carrie, the author, saw the light of worthiness in another creature, even when no one else seemed to be able to see it. She held that truth in her heart and mind and simply knew a bigger possibility for life for both of them. And as they stepped into that new possibility, they began to give and receive beautifully and mutually. Stories, even stories like this true one, are full of symbols that we can learn from. So Dufresne, in the story, the horse, symbolizes our unworthy idea of ourselves, and Carrie represents the divine within and around each of us. Dufresne was full of pain because of his life experiences at the rodeo. Dufresne could only show Carrie his ability to withdraw and protect himself from any further hurt. To Dufresne, receiving meant the potential for pain. Food meant pain. Play meant pain. Love meant more pain. It was a tricky path. And most of us can relate to Dufresne. But Carrie, she could see past all the scratches, all the scars, all the fear, all the defensiveness. Carrie could see possibility and potential, and the divine in Carrie only saw beautiful visions for him. She held in her mind the idea of a peaceful and loving existence for him. But in order for him to get to her vision, he had to surrender and trust her universal love, didn't he? He had to believe he was worthy and that she was a friendly and loving presence. So just like Dufresne, it's part of our inherent nature to know how to receive. It's one of our greatest and beautiful birthrights as living creatures, right? Because right at birth, we receive the breath of God, the touch of other beings, food and sustenance and comfort and hopefully love. And before they are trained otherwise, children absolutely love receiving, don't they? Horses are the same way. You know, kids just light up when gifts come to them or unexpected surprises, treat of some sort. Kids reach their hands up joyfully to receive, usually without hesitation. They don't question their worthiness. These young children don't. But somehow we are trained when we're pretty young that to receive is somehow selfish or inappropriate or painful. We're taught to be modest, aren't we? Taught to be modest and only expect to receive when we've earned it. We are taught that we're to measure ourselves as worthy of receiving or unworthy of receiving. And every family trains their children differently about what makes one worthy or not. Most of us are taught that giving is far better than receiving, and that giving makes us more worthy all the way around. But is that true? Is that true? The simple question becomes, right now, in your current version of yourself, are you ready to receive? Are you standing with your arms kind of wide open to the universe, willing to accept everything available in the experience of your life? Can you accept that Spirit is standing quietly in your paddock, knowing only your beauty and your potential, just waiting to bless you? Are you ready to be in the green pasture as a loved horse? Are you open to receive all of the blessings of God? Things like the sunlight, the moonlight, the intoxicating sound and smell of rain, your life's calling, love that makes you feel head over heels, profound empathy, amazing grace, abundance of every kind, satisfying experience of fulfillment, wide open freedom, whatever your heart desires. Are you really ready to receive all that Spirit has to give and freely gives to all alike? So I think the honest answer to that question I asked, are you ready to receive? I think the honest answer is sometimes. Sometimes. Sometimes we are ready to receive. Sometimes we are open to being blessed. You know, maybe you're one of these people that have just healed all this and you can just say, yes, I'm ready to receive. And if that's your answer, that's wonderful. But for far more of us, the answer is sometimes. And at other times, our answer actually may be an outright no. No, Reverend Laine, I do not feel worthy to receive all those things you just listed. Being that wide open and receptive is simply too risky, and it makes me uncomfortable. And if that is your answer, you are not alone. I love Brene Brown. And Brene Brown, through years of collecting data, says that about 15 to 20% of people live in that full-hearted yes way of giving and receiving love. Essentially, they're in that kind of divine synchronistic flow of life. So that means 80 to 85% of us are not always living in that divine flow. And her findings suggest that what causes the ability to receive as well as give is whether or not people believe they are lovable as a core truth. The question becomes, do we really believe we are irrefutably lovable and valuable? That we don't need any benchmark of success to prove it. So Brene says that we can know our value when we can know it, when we are more in touch with our feelings, both the feelings we label as positive and the feelings we label as negative. That helps us become big-hearted receivers of good and givers of good. Here's her actual writing. Of all the thousands of people I've interviewed and studied over the years looking for patterns in the data, only about 15 to 20% were folks living with their whole hearts, folks who were really all in when it came to their relationship. So I decided that I wanted to find out why. What qualities did these people have that made them so capable of both giving and receiving? And when I examined my research, I discovered that these were people who deeply believed that they were worthy of love and belonging. These folks believed that regardless of the circumstances, unlike the majority of us who think, okay, I'm worthy of love and belonging a little bit, but I'll be super worthy if I get promoted, or I'll be super worthy if I lose 20 pounds. These folks believed that they were lovable and that they had a place in the world, and those beliefs translated into specific choices they made every day. They were aware, they recognized shame, and they knew how to deal with it. They recognized vulnerability, and they were willing to feel it rather than ignore or numb it. Brene Brown. So my talk title today is Irrefutably Superworthy, because my message is that you, yes, you and you and you are superworthy of receiving every good thing that the universe has in store for you. You're superworthy, irrefutably superworthy. Irrefutable means that it is impossible to deny or disprove. So that means you cannot deny your worthiness, and you cannot prove to me that you are unworthy. It's irrefutable that you are super worthy, period. It doesn't matter what's happened to you in your life before this moment of worthiness, just like Dufresne. But my knowing your worthiness does you no good unless you know it for yourself. Carrie knew Dufresne's worthiness, but he also had to know it for himself, and he's a horse. So here's the deal. Chances are you were raised in some form of religious rodeo, like Christianity. And the premise of that religion is that you are born in sin, and that you must be forgiven to be worthy of God's love. And if you weren't raised that way, that's fine. But most of us were taught that we're not worthy of receiving. Most of us are raised in a shame-based structure. It's shameful to want things. It's shameful to ask for things. Sometimes it's shameful to just be yourself. And that kind of life leaves scars internally You know, Dufresne showed his scars outwardly on his body, but most of us have those shame scars inside of us. So how do we get from that kind of an upbringing? How do we get from there to a place of having the ability to fling ourselves open to receive from abandon with the universe, the love of God? How do we get to that sense of wholeheartedness where we know our own value, like Brené Brown describes? You know, how do we step into the vulnerability required to just open our arms to receive? How do we walk toward Carrie, toward Spirit, and allow our lives to change for the better? And there are so many paths to get there. Some may find their way to self-worth in a therapist's chair. Some find it in a recovery group. Some write in their journal, all the way to freedom. Some work with spiritual coaches and practitioners, and sometimes the shift just happens in the quiet over time. But regardless the path you walk to wholeness, there's one thing is certain. You must intentionally welcome more into your life. There's got to be a new thought. There's got to be a shift in consciousness from the sense of unworthiness to a sense of inherent worthiness. And for many of us, that shift comes through a fresh understanding of our place in the universe, our place in the world as a divine, holy being of light and love. Because when we open ourselves up to a new way of looking at ourselves, not as a creature of sin and shame, like we were taught, but a beloved being of God and love, we get a glimpse of our own worth. We're a conduit that Spirit must use to express itself in whatever world that we inhabit. Some of us get a glimpse that we breathe the breath of God given to us freely, and that breath is pure and perfect, and it infuses every cell of our being. We begin to understand that we can look at all of our life experiences, even the rodeo ones, as having an order, an intelligence, a purpose, and we begin to see things that have heretofore made us feel broken and unworthy were actually precious and rich experiences that made us strong and whole and worthy of every good thing. So how would your life change in a positive direction if you stepped fully into your superworthiness today? You know, what blessings would be yours to claim if you stopped pushing them away in disbelief that you deserve them? What would happen if you open your arms and your mind and your heart to fully receive what's being offered to you every day? I dare you to find out. And start small. You know, start by practicing receiving little things, like a compliment. You know, when someone says to you, how kind are you, or how generous you are, or how thoughtful you are, just say, thank you for seeing me that way. Even if you can't see yourself that way, thank them for seeing you that way. When someone offers to help you in some way, let them. Spirit might have just heard your inner longing for assistance and sent them your way. But you block the synchronicity of life when you refuse that helping hand. And when you receive a new idea or a suggestion, be open to it. Spirit generously gives us all ideas and inner nudges about how to solve dilemmas and challenges. But what do? We often just brush them aside or doubt our own ability or question the willingness of others to actually cooperate with our ideas. And when someone new shows up in your life, when Carrie strolls toward you in your paddock, stay curious. Why have they shown up? What gifts might they be bearing that have your name all over them? And when a blessing bigger than you can imagine flows in your direction, say yes, get in the horse trailer and go. If you are generously giving in the universe, don't be surprised when astounding generosity is offered back to you. Walk toward possibility. So my question still stands. Are you ready to receive? I hope your answer is a resounding yes, because you are super worthy, irrefutably super worthy. And so it is. So do our one sentence affirmation. Will you read it with me? I stand with my body and heart open to goodness, and I know that there is nothing that separates me from the river of life that flows through me as I give and receive.